Hey, everybody, welcome back to View from the Top podcast, where we help growth-minded men who want momentum in their business, their family, and their finance get through the valleys and up the mountain to their very own View from the Top. I am so glad you're listening in today. My name is Kevin, also known as Wally, and I've got Big A ready to smash the pedal to the floor.
Come on, Wally. Come on. You know, I was just listening to our intro, and I had someone ask me recently, they said, Big A, why do you call this View from the Top? And I said, nobody wants a view from the bottom, right? We all want to go through the valley and work our way up the mountain to have whatever your view from the top is. And so it looks different, you know, for everybody. And that's the reason I'm so excited for us to do these podcasts, is because hopefully we talk on some things that add some value, get you through that valley and up to the top so you can have your view from the top. So, yeah, I was just listening to it. I'm sorry, Wally, that I normally don't listen to those intros, but I happened to listen to this one. And I was like, you know, I need to explain what view from the top is. And it just looks differently for everybody.
That's good.
Man, what a great season this is right now. Summertime. I love it. And I know normally we don't say anything about when we're recording these, but I can't help it. This is my time of the year. Like, I love warm weather.
Is there something you particularly like about warm weather? Like some people like cold weather.
Yes, fishing. I can go fishing more, and I love to go fish. And I love to be at the ballpark watching my grandkids play sports. And so we're probably at the ballpark way more than probably Robin would want to admit that she likes, but I love it, man. I could go to the ballpark every night. I love summertime.
Good. Hey, I got a question for you. So when you're out to the ballpark, do you always eat dinner at home, or you go to a restaurant sometimes?
You know, it varies. If we get leave early enough, we'll stop by and grab dinner. We got 2 or 3 favorite places here that we like to go. It varies. I'm curious to why you ask.
All right. Well, what's one of your favorite places? Just give me one.
Yeah, I like Jonathan's. It is a fun place. They've got the best Nikki's quesadillas. If you ever come to Nashville, you got to go to Jonathan's, Indian Lake Road, and order Nikki's quesadillas. You'll not be disappointed. I'm going to go there maybe when I leave this podcast. It sounds so good.
You're hungry. Yeah, it's good. So, well, my question is, so when you're at, maybe this is a bad example to say Jonathan's, because you like your quesadillas, and they probably never come out wrong, right? But when you're at a restaurant and there's a problem with your food, do you ask the server to correct it, or do you always eat it as is?
If they can correct it without me sending my food back, I may ask for something in addition, but I never complain about the food. I never send it back and let them redo it and get it out.
So if it was a cold steak, like you would,
I would never. I never complained about the food. I have no, listen, I'll tell you what burned me on this. When I was a kid, I had an older brother that's crazy, and he worked at a restaurant. And he said they called it the grump tray. And he said, you can only imagine what was done to some of that food. And if you complained, you got a lot of things off the grump tray. And I'm like, dude, I'm done. I'm done forever. There's no way I'm ever sending anything back, right? I may order it different next time. But for me, my brother ruined me. I'm never sending it back.
Wow. Yeah.
What about you?
I hadn't thought about that, though. Like, yeah, if you send it back, man, if someone's not in a very good mood, that could not turn out very well for you. It could come out, something could happen to you. Yeah. But no, I asked that just because it just seems like, I don't know what's up with Sonia, my wife, but man, it seems like it's not her fault. It's not her fault. I want to say 50% of the time that we go out to eat somewhere, I'm not kidding you, 50% of the time, something's wrong with her food. And I'm not talking about, like, I guess here's what I'm talking about. We just got back from vacation last week. It was great. I had a good time. We get off the ship, went on a cruise, get off the ship on Saturday, go to eat something at a restaurant while we're waiting at the airport. And literally, like, she moves her vegetables on her plate, and there's this, like, long curly black hair just, sitting down there and nestled in the food. And it's like, what do you do with that? Do you send it back? Do you just move the hair? Do you her steak's not, it's undercooked or overcooked, or sometimes they just bring her the wrong thing, right? So they just bring her something else, and she's actually gotten to the point where it seems to happen so much that she doesn't send it. She used to send it back every time, like, hey, you need to fix this, right? You're paying good money, especially now with inflation, man. The stuff isn't cheap. That's crazy. Right. And so you kind of want what you want. And but over time, we send things back way less, because it's like, let's just eat it and move on, like kind of thing. But I was just curious if you.
I'm a eat it or don't eat it. Like in that case, I wouldn't have had the vegetables. So you get a big old
curly hair. Yeah, okay. You wouldn't eat the vegetables.
I wouldn't have eaten the vegetables.
You wouldn't eat them.
I wouldn't eat it, but and I definitely wouldn't send it back.
Interesting. All right.
Yeah. Be interesting to hear from some of our audience and what you would do. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what the audience says. We'll take a poll. That's what we need to start doing. We need to start taking a survey. You and I differ on a lot of things, the way we do things. And we need to tally this up annually, and we see who wins at the end of the year, who most of our audience identifies with, Big A or Wally. So I don't know. We may start that challenge pretty soon.
Yeah, be more looking in your email if you're not subscribed to the Climb. So the Climb is what everybody's on to get to that view from the top. So the Climb is a email newsletter that comes out. The full newsletter comes out every 2 weeks, and then there's a short one that comes out every week that has the most current episode of the podcast on it. So I encourage, if you maybe we'll get Julia, who manages that content for us, to get a poll in there and see if we can get some people respond to some of these questions. That'd be fun. So go to the Climb. So go to viewfromthetop.com/climb. That's viewfromthetop.com/climb. And just put your email in there, and you can unsubscribe anytime if you think it's foolishness, but I doubt you will. It's pretty good stuff in there for
Wally. It's better than hold on for a second. We got to give a shout out to Julia, because she's doing an amazing job of content creation, creating. We put some cool stuff in there, and I rarely say this, but I'm going to say it with confidence, not arrogance. It's really good. And I don't think you want to miss the Climb. Julia spends an inordinate amount of time compiling great information, tidbits of information. There's some really good stuff in there. And I want to encourage you strongly to subscribe to that. It doesn't cost anything, right? It's a free subscription. And so be sure to go to the link Kevin just gave you, subscribe to it. Let us know what your thoughts are. But Julia, I'm giving you a shout out. You're doing a great job. Way to go.
Good stuff.
Wally, we've been talking a little bit about different personas that are within Iron Sharpens Iron Mastermind. And I've been thinking a lot about the different people that we serve on a regular basis. We have an avatar, but within that avatar, there's numbers of different personas. Different people deal with different things. And I want to talk about something that's pretty near and dear to my heart, not because I enjoy it, because I didn't enjoy it. And we're going to call this the all alone Adam scenario. You know, being in isolation, being alone, feeling like no one gets you, no one understands. I think we need to talk about that more, because the more and more I coach, the more that we're involved in the mastermind, the more I hear when people make application to join that they just feel alone. They're like, hey, I'm out there doing business. It's not that we're doing bad. It's just that we feel like we're alone. And I start thinking about those guys, and we can't quantify it to be one exact family, right? You can't do that. But when you think about it, a lot of these men they're married. They got a couple of kids, they graduated from college. A lot of them have got mortgages. I get on to people sometimes. Sometimes their mortgage is more than it should be, right? I've been around Dave Ramsey so long, over the years, that he's got me kind of burnt about getting this, this ridiculous mortgage. But a lot of these guys have mortgages that are teetering on maybe a little too much. Maybe there's some student loans that these guys have. They've got a couple of kids, like I said earlier. Some of them are in private schools. I know that you did some things related to education that's a little different than others, and I sent my kids to a private school as well, and it's pricey. It's hard to do that sometimes. We tried to live in a pretty cool place. We tried to have a nice house. Oftentimes I would find myself making enough money, but there wasn't really any extra. There was like, people talk about investments, and I'm like, man, I'm trying to survive. What are you talking about? It's like paying for this nice house and nice cars and private school. There just wasn't any extra. And oftentimes I would find myself, living in this community, but still feeling isolated, feeling that no one understands me. They don't get me. They haven't walked in my shoes. They haven't lived my life. I don't know. Is this just me, or have you felt kind of alone in your career? You've had a very successful career. And did you find yourself feeling alone at times?
Yeah, you were kind of going through the some of those characteristics of a guy that might feel alone right now. And I think it's interesting that especially you mentioned someone that's been to college, and you didn't really mention specifically someone that owns their own business. And I don't think you have to own your own business to feel alone. But I do think that there is an elevated sense of, whether you've been to college or not, whether you own a business or not, I think when you have an elevated level of responsibility, that the way you feel alone is very different. Not that the average Joe doesn't feel alone. I'm sure they do. But there is an elevated sense of feeling alone when you have a business and you have an elevated sense of responsibility in an executive role, or is it ownership or something like that. Like it is. That was my experience.
You got all those employees. You had 40, 50 employees at the height of your company, and you lay down at night and start thinking about the decisions I make impact, 40 employees, which equates to 150 or so family members.
Yeah, and you may
feel that
in the business too. Like we talked a little bit about in one of the previous episodes with Anthony Witt. We were talking about work-life balance. And I think that episode was fantastic. If you have not listened to that, go back and listen to that. I think it was just last week or a couple weeks ago, but I think it was episode 35, I think. But go back to there, look for life balance, and you'll see it. Listen to that. Talks a lot about communication, and I think that communication is where we really feel alone. Is that we don't have people. I didn't. That's my experience. And I'll call myself an all alone Adam, especially when I started building my business, being an entrepreneur, having that mindset. It's different. It is. It's different than most people. Not everyone, but most people. And oftentimes, I was on a mastermind call yesterday, and one of the guys on the mastermind call, he's running a business, but he's struggling because his wife doesn't get what he's doing. And that communication of trying to figure out, imagine if he's on his own. And I was there. That was me back in late. I started the business in 2003, really got it going by 2008. And by 2010, I was like finding some success. Like I've got some momentum. That's not the problem. But I didn't have anybody to talk to. I had some people on leadership teams, and I had other people. I even had a partner, right? And that was a whole different story for a different day. But I had literally no one. At church, I was in Bible studies and ministry, and family members that loved me, for sure, but just didn't know how to speak into what I was going through.
They didn't have context of what you were dealing with, right?
And
you don't want to bring that kind of stuff to family events. You don't want to go to the Uncle Billy's birthday party and sit over there and talk about your business situation, and then you don't have time to give them context. What is one of the things that gave you the most sense of aloneness? And I'll tell you, for me, while you're thinking about that question, it was the financial stress. I wanted everybody to think I had it all figured out. Just to be honest with you, I spent 2 decades alone, not in a mastermind group, because I was too prideful to admit that I didn't know what I was doing many times. And it cost me a fortune to try to figure that out, because I would go it alone and I would make a mistake and it would be costly. And then I would do it again and it would be costly. And I was like, man, I need some help. But like, I don't want somebody to know that I don't have this particular scenario figured out. So I isolated intentionally because of my ego. I just didn't want people to know that Big A didn't have it all figured out, because then I would have to swallow my pride and say, hey, I don't. And my fear was they would think less of me. Now, as I've matured and gotten older and had a number of businesses, I realized that endears you to people. Yeah. They don't think less of you. They think more of you. What they think less of is the arrogance and the pride. But it kept me there, right? And so if you're feeling a sense of the pride that I'm talking about, Ryan Holiday wrote a great book called Ego is the Enemy. And I recommend that book highly, that you go read that so that you can set that aside and maybe get support. So what about you? What do you think drove you to that aloneness, that you weren't willing to go out, or maybe you didn't even know to go out?
I didn't know.
Like,
yeah, for me, it was different. It wasn't a matter of pride for me. Once I got to that point where I'm like, holy cow, like you're looking around, it's like everybody I'm talking to just well wish me and, make comments like, yeah, but you're a business owner, so you have all the freedom in the world, and you get to go out to lunch and you can write that off. So you must be making tons of money. I'm like, what the heck are they even talking about? I get what they're saying, but there was never any depth or context that you're talking about. And so it was very, very difficult. My motivation, right? That's what it was for me. Like, what was I motivated for? I tried a couple different mastermind type groups before I landed in Iron Sharpens Iron in 2016. And I tried, my first one was in 2012. And then I think the other one was in 2000, a couple years after that. And we'll get into a different topic for a different day of what I was looking for in a mastermind. But one of the elements was two things for me. One was I didn't want to be wrong. That was my motivation. I didn't want to have to go to that employee, to go to to go to Joe, who works in the marketing department and has got a wife and two kids at home. He's been with you for 7 years. I didn't want to go to Joe and have to say, hey, Joe, this is what's going on. I made this mistake. I didn't want to be wrong. And it's not that I didn't ever make mistakes. And even recently, it's not that I don't ever, make mistakes. But I will tell you that when you're alone, the gravity, the weightiness, the consequence of the choices that you make and they're wrong, they usually go really deep. Like the choices I make today that may be a little iffy, I've gotten counsel for them. I'm not alone anymore. I still get to make the choice. That's what I think people get wrong on this. Say, well, if I get people around me that speak into me that, I got to listen to them, I don't get to make my own decisions. That's not true. You're around the right people, you get to make your own decisions, but now you've got context, you got information, right? You've got some things. So for me, my motivation was I didn't want to be wrong. I don't know where else to find it.
When you were busy, you didn't want to be wrong. You didn't want to go to Joe and say, hey, I was wrong, and affect his life, right? You feel that weight.
Yeah.
What was one of the excuses for maybe not getting in a group earlier? What I hear all the time is, I don't have time. I hear that all the time. I don't have the bandwidth. I'm stretched thin already. I've got a job. I've got family commitments. I'm struggling to find time for myself or any interest that I've got. And man, I just do not have the time to invest in one more activity. When guys are feeling alone, I don't know, it made me think when you were talking about you were alone, you didn't have anybody to share that with. Everything is always worse when it's in our own head, right? We go to the very end of the rope and say, I have nothing else, because you don't know what else to do. You don't know what you don't know. I find it oftentimes when I get within a group of peers, people that have similar core values, similar worldviews, people that are aspirational. You talk a lot about momentum, people that desire accountability. When I get around those people, when I flush it out loud, and I even do this with you all the time, I'll come to you, oftentimes, and I'll say, man, I just got to talk this through. And you don't even say a word sometimes, and I'll talk it through. And because I've got somebody listening that's interested, that cares, when I get to the end of it, a lot of the times I'll find my own solution. And then you'll say, well, if you'll modify this or do this, I think it'll even make it better. And I leave those conversations most of the time feeling much, much better because I've flushed it out loud. And when you're alone, you just don't have anybody to do that. You don't have anybody you can trust. You don't have anybody that has context. You don't have anybody really that cares, right? And when we get around those people, it just makes a world of difference. So for me, when I hear people say that, I'm like, okay, so you can take 2 decades to figure it out like I did, and that's okay. Or you can figure it out in a few years with trusted advisors. Now, do you have time or do you not have time? And it puts a whole different spin on it. But how were you feeling under the gun from a time standpoint when you were running your online business?
So before I answer your question, I'll tell you a story about John. And that's not his fictitious name, but that's his name. His name is John. Let's talk about John. John's one of those guys that I've known for a long time, probably 12, 15 years. He started his business similar time that I started my business, back in mid 2005-ish, 2006. So I guess it's almost been 20 years now. Yeesh. Wow, it's been a long time. So known John that long. And when I started getting into the right types, so I started looking for groups and things to join, because I couldn't find. I started like the local chamber of commerce. I even tried getting some local business guys in my church to meet up and stuff. And the problem was there wasn't any commitment there. So it would last for a couple months and then they'd stop showing up, whatever, because something, whatever came along. But anyway, so here's John. I start doing these things, learning these things. John starts hearing about it, and I'm telling him about it because we're buddies. And he's like, "Oh, I really should need to do that. I really need to do that. I should do that." And then a year goes by, 2 years go by. I'm like, "We'll connect back up again now," and be like, "Oh yeah, man, I really need to check that out." And he's like, "What's that cost?" I'm like, I tell him. He's like, "What? Cost that much?" I'm like, "Dude, you just sat here for an hour on the phone and you told me about all your woes that you've had for the last 15 years that still exist today." Why do you think that is, John? Because you only know what you know, bro.
Yeah.
That's it. You just know what you know. And when I came to the point of, so cost and time, I think is what it comes down to for somebody like John. It's like, whoa, that costs money. And I'm a pretty busy guy, like, taking an hour out of my week. For me, when I came to the point in my life where I was like, man, I don't know what I don't know, and I know I need help, and I don't want to be wrong, so I'm looking for help. And as I started getting help and figuring it out along the way, an hour a week or whatever it is. I mean, some groups they meet once every other week, or they meet once a month, whatever it is. I think there's pros and cons to all of it. You got to find out what works for you, and not just what works for you, but like what really works for you. Like there are ingredients that you need in groups that you join, that you're part of, that you invest time in and money in. Like you need to know what those ingredients are and be very intentional about them. But when I started figuring it out and deciding what I wanted to do, for me it was the hour a week. Because the first couple that I joined were like an hour a month. And one was, I think they were both a month. They're every month you met for like an hour and a half, 2 hours. And frankly, the ingredients weren't right. It didn't work because you don't live life a month at a time.
No, man, there's so much happens within 30 days. It's like I've already forgotten about that and gone to the next thing. It
seems like an eternity of business sometimes, doesn't it? 30 days. But
yeah.
So getting into the weekly for me, and it became, I like Derek Champagne, one of the guys that we both know. He, good dude. He uses the word no foul, and that became a no foul for me. Was that weekly cadence, and unless I'm on vacation and I can't get to it, or I made a decision that I want to spend time with my family that week or whatever, or something unexpected comes up that I can't.
Sure.
I miss. But beyond that, man, I'm there. And the value, you don't get the value out of one call. I think it's funny too, right? People are like, well, okay, so we've had this conversation about relationships, and this is what it is. At the end of the day, these are relationships. And so I've struggled in the past, long time ago. I've struggled with relationships in terms of like, I just want to spend a little bit of time and get a lot of value. Right? It's my personality. And I know that that's not right. But yet that's how we treat so many things. We treat that way with maybe could be a mastermind group, could be a church, could be, hopefully it's not, could be your wife. Yeah. Right? Hopefully it's not. But yeah.
You get out of it what you put in it.
100%.
And so, one of the things for me that makes me feel alone is when I'm really stressed. And I've always said to the audience that's listening right now that I'm going to be very vulnerable and transparent and authentic on these calls. And I'm dealing with a family member currently that has some major health issues that's very stressful. I'm just going to be honest with you. As much stress as I've ever dealt with in my career, that's a long time, like 44 years in my career. But I can't tell you how many days go by. I bet there's not a day that goes by I don't get multiple text messages and email, if not multiple emails, a phone call, a private message on Facebook that says, hey, Big A, I'm thinking about you. I'm here for you. I'm praying for you. Is there anything you need? And I'm like, man, that to me is an ROI, being in a community where you're walking with people each and every day, because I'm not alone. And I can't tell you the sense of encouragement that is to me every single day when I get those messages, right? And so another aspect of that is, if you don't learn to deal with the stress, is burnout. And burnout is a horrible thing. And again, I want to share something that happened to me about a year and a half ago. I personally had a couple of health challenges that I was working through, had some things that weren't regulated properly. And I remember, Wally, the look on your face on a Zoom call when I told you I was going to take off November and December. And this was 2 weeks into October when I told you that I gave you a 2-week notice. You're like, you're talking about this November and December.
I remember.
And I said, yes. He goes, like, in 2 weeks, like 14 days from now. I said, yes, I'm unplugging completely, because I hit the wall, literally hit the wall. Like, I was done. And it was all these health issues I was navigating, and it was stress, and it was, life catches up sometimes, and we get that. But here's what's cool. We never missed a beat, right? The organization never missed a beat. The groups that I led never missed a beat. People stepped in, they led the groups. It was amazing because we built a community. So the question that I want to ask the audience is what would happen to you if you were isolated and you didn't have community and you didn't have people that gave you, listen, if you haven't had a storm, you will have a storm. Someone told me one time, you're either going into a storm, just finished a storm, or about to have a storm, right? It's just life. And I can't even begin to tell you the value of not being isolated during those storms, right? Because everything is just so bad in our own head. And when we can flush it out and talk about it, people that care about us. And that's what really, for me, is the best part of being in a mastermind, being in community, board of directors, trusted advisors, whatever you want to call them, right? For me, that is the thing. It's because relationships matter most. For me, that is the thing, the people that can walk alongside you. So when you think about, Wally, being alone for yourself, is there anything else that pops to the surface that maybe our listeners are experiencing that we could touch on just for a brief few minutes? Is there anything else that comes to mind for you?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. I think that when we get alone and we get isolated, you have this quote that you've said often, and people don't often think of it this way, but isolation, which is being alone, isolation is the enemy of excellence. And I believe that wholeheartedly. I've experienced that, exactly what that's like. And excellence, there's 5 primary areas of life. We have a personal life, a spiritual life, a relationship type life, and professional life. There's a financial aspect to life. And so there's 5 primary areas in our lives. And, if we want excellence at any one of those things, there's no way for me to know all the answers to all 5 of those areas all the time.
No,
just not possible. And so when I find myself alone, and I don't have in the past when I found myself alone, even now when I choose, right, there's moments where I'll be like, well, I'm going to just kind of run this one on my own and not bring this up to, my group or whatever the case may be. I've never thought of a time where I didn't end up actually bringing it up, because usually it was, wasn't thinking about it correctly in the first place. But
you know what happens is that alpha male kicks in. It does. That's every true. Single time. I've been sitting here contemplating.
I got this.
Yeah, throwing you under the bus, and we won't go into it today. But you even went to the group once and shared, and you got unanimous counsel, and you did the opposite. What were you thinking? You did the opposite. It cost you about 6 times as much money to work through that deal. And then you came back to the group and apologized. You said, man, I should have never went against that counsel. See, that's that alpha male. We all have it. Don't feel bad. Man. Listen, I can't tell you how many times I've felt the same way. It's like, I'll show you. I'll do this.
You know what it was? Like, no. We want to be right.
We do.
We want to be right.
We do.
Can we convince ourselves that we want to be right? And
we do.
Yeah. And I think that's.
I'm not getting on you. I've done the same thing. Over the years, I've done the same. You know what I did discover in the burnout? We'll kind of end with this. What I discovered is that I wasn't taking care of myself like I should have been. Right? I've got all this responsibility. We've got dozens and hundreds of people that are all around, whether it's podcast hosts or ISI members or coaching clients or facilitators or peers and colleagues, all these people, and then all these team members. And I'm like, I got to do this, and I got to work more. I got to work harder. And then I was neglecting my own health, and there was things that I wasn't doing. And I remember Lee Cockrell interviewing Lee years ago. He was one of the top executives at Disney, and he had about 20 or 30,000 employees. And he had, I think, 5 theme parks that was under his direction. And I asked him one day, and I was hoping to get just a real nugget from a Disney executive, on the thing that was a secret. How do you manage that? And he goes, I do have a secret. And I said, what is it? And I was all excited. Lee's probably in his 80s now. But he said, I take care of myself first. And I said, what? He said, at the time, I think he was like 78 years old. In that first interview, I interviewed him. And he said, I can still wear the same clothes, the size that I wore when I graduated from college. He said, I work out 7 days a week. I really monitor my intake. And he said, because if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of your family, and you sure can't take care of 20,000 employees. And man, that left an indelible impression on me. I really thought about that a lot. And I have tried to take care of myself better. I hired a trainer. It was for accountability. Started eating cleaner. Recently I've kind of noticed I gained a few pounds. And so I've kind of reversed it and said, no, I'm going to get that back off. And so it's the accountability. And I've said that in my group and said, I need this accountability. I said it to my accountability partners. I said, I need you to ask me about this regularly. If I didn't have that, I'd probably weigh 300 pounds, because the stress and not taking care of myself. So I want to encourage the listeners today that being alone sometimes can be a direct cause of inadequate self-care. And you need to get away. You need to unplug. Like, I like to fish. Everybody knows that's my thing. I go out on the lake at 5 a.m, fish 2 or 3 hours. I'll put my earbuds in. I'll listen to praise and worship music. I'll pray. I'll just be still. I'll be quiet. And every now and then, it's rare, but every now and then I'll carry a guest. And it's selfish because that's like my time. It's like a place that's safe for me. Sometimes I'll carry a book. Robin doesn't know this, so if you ever see her, don't tell her I told you. I'll take a book, and I'll go out there sometimes in the middle of the lake, and I'll just read my book. Or I'll just sit there, right? It's self-care. It's reflecting. It's meditating. It's getting the clutter out. And we need to do that. So physically, we've got to take care of ourselves, emotionally, spiritually, right? Mentally, we've got to take care of ourselves because there's so much pressure. And so thank you, Lee Cockrell, if you're listening to this today, for really reminding me that we need to take care of ourselves first and foremost, and then we can take care of our responsibilities with our home and with our businesses. And I think it will help you with some of this stress that we're dealing with today.
Yeah. Well, at least now I know. Now I know why I don't get invited to go fishing more often. And I'm okay with that, by the way. So I've been wondering sometimes. I'm like, man, that makes total sense. I'm with you. I would invite you to go mountain biking with me.
It's the same.
Yeah, same thing. I like my space. And that's a place where I can just decompress. And
it's one of the few places that I can go do that, right? Because you've got grandkids and kids and wife and colleagues and business people. Everybody's coming to Nashville. They're always texting me, Big A, I want you to take me to the lake. I want you to go fishing. I'll get back with you on that.
Yeah. Isn't that, you know what? Okay, so before we finish up today, isn't that an interesting point, though? Like maybe, I don't know, whoever's listening today, maybe you feel like all alone, Adam. And you can have a lot of people around you and still feel alone.
Yes.
You can have a lot of people around you and still be alone. And I think probably more now so than ever that in our society today, we probably have more connections than we've ever had. And we definitely feel more alone than we ever have.
You know, Wally, you said something interesting in the episode a little earlier, and I do want to highlight now that you brought that up. You mentioned that you'd gone to the Chamber of Commerce, you went to your church and those kind of things. You would never in a million years go to the Chamber of Commerce and share all your personal context.
No, never.
So you would more than likely not go to a church and share about the business challenges, problems in your marriage, financial issues that you're dealing with, maybe emotional struggles, maybe pride, maybe ego. I don't know. First of all, there's not enough time, right? You've got small groups and there's not enough time to do that. So if we're not doing it in those organizations, where are we doing it? And that's the question that the audience needs to ask themselves. They're like, man, I'm around people all the time. And I told this story recently. I'll share it again just for a moment, but I shared recently with a guy that came to Nashville, wanted to drink coffee with me. And I set him up, Wally. I set him up. I said, hey, I'm thinking about buying this condo. And he told me it was a great idea. And then I went on to tell him, you don't know my family, my superpowers, my blind spot, my kryptonite, my goals, my core values, my mission. You sure don't know anything about my finances. And he said, no, I don't know anything about any of those things. I said, how in the world then could you help me make any decision if you don't have full context to what it is I'm trying to solve? And yet we do that every single day. People every single day are asking for advice and they don't give the context. And when that happens, you're not going to get advice that's applicable to you personally. So a lot of you that are alone today, I promise you that isolation is the enemy to excellence. And if you're really looking to go forward, you're really looking to grow, you're really looking to get that maximum momentum, it's imperative that you get in community. I just want you to think about today, what is it that you're doing that avails yourself to the information that we've shared today? So think about it as you go out there today and build your own view from the top.
As you've listened in today, we really want to give you guys a resource to connect with us. And the easiest way to do that, we've mentioned it in the podcast today, is through the Climb. That's really the first place to start connecting with us and learn what we're about. Get great content that's free. You just comes to your inbox, you get it there. And if you don't like it, you can easily unsubscribe. But I encourage you to just go check that out. It's viewfromthetop.com/climb, CLIMB. And it's just once a week, once every other week. Easy to digest, bite-sized topics that every small business owner, every executive, every entrepreneur, every husband, every father can you guys can use these to help you guys live a life of success and significance. So go check that out, viewfromthetop.com/climb. And we will see you or listen to you or hear you next week.